US President-elect Donald Trump, he's yet again rekindled debates on American expansionism with provocative remarks about acquiring Greenland, reclaiming the Panama Canal, hinting at annexing Canada as the 51st great state of America. While critics dismiss these as rhetorical ploys, others do suggest that they carry strategic undertones, evoking the 19th century concept of the manifest destiny. Now, first, let's talk about Iceland. Beg your pardon, Greenland. Since his first term, Donald Trump has advocated for purchasing Greenland altogether, a move that was met with disbelief from aides and rejection from Denmark, under which, by the way, Greenland functions as an autonomous territory. We'll tell you all about it. But why Greenland? Why so much of focus on Greenland? Well, Donald Trump calls owning Greenland a national security imperative. The US military's Pituffik space base on the island plays a critical role in missile defense and space surveillance, cementing its strategic importance. But then again, beyond its size, spanning over 8 lakh square miles, Greenland boasts of rich reserves of oil and rare earth minerals such as neodymium, crucial for global supply chains and currently dominated by China and Russia. Now, back in 2019, Senator Tom Cotton backed the idea in a New York Times op-ed, citing strategic benefits and raising alarms over Chinese attempts to purchase assets and build infrastructure on the island. The same was said for the Panama Canal as well. Now, talking about who actually controls and owns Greenland. Well, Greenland remains under Denmark's sovereignty, though it gained self-rule in 1979. Danish leaders firmly rejected Donald Trump's renewed interest, with Greenland's prime minister also reiterating that the island is quote-unquote not up for sale. But then again, Trump has also targeted the Panama Canal, a critical link between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, accusing Panama of imposing unfair fees on United States' ships. And speaking in Phoenix, he called for the canal's return despite it being handed to Panama in 1999 under a treaty signed by the then President Jimmy Carter. Joining us here on the broadcast to decode and dissect what's really at play is Dr. Ramlendu Misra, Professor of the International Politics at Lancaster University, joining us live from London. Mr. Misra, very warm welcome to you, Professor. Always a pleasure to have you with us on Newsline. First and foremost, the question that everybody's asking, are these empty rhetorics or is there, strategic weightage behind everything that the President-elect is now saying? How are you looking at these developments?
Hi, good evening to all the viewers. First of all, it is not empty rhetoric. United States has a history of managing to get territories of other European powers. If we go back to the 19th century, it managed to get the US Virgin Islands from Denmark, which is in the Caribbean. And it also managed to get Alaska from Russia. It bought it from Russia. And then we also have Louisiana, which is part of the United States. Now it bought it from the French. So there is a history there. And along with that, you have to look at the political process, which goes by the name of one of the former US presidents, Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine is all about keeping all the outside powers out of the US sphere of influence, both in North and South Americas. And the question, of course, here is who is he talking about? If it is kind of built, this argument, this rhetoric is built within the shadow of Monroe Doctrine, then it would appear that Denmark still is a colonial power in the Western Hemisphere. And that is what United States wouldn't want. And United States also could use the strategic logic, strategic argument that the China is a threat, Russia is a threat, therefore it has got every right to push its way forward.
No, you're absolutely right, Professor. But okay, all right. These are not empty rhetorics. All right. We got that. But how realistic are President-elect's, ambitions at this point in time? Wouldn't this, make the other nearby nations, turn a sour eye towards the United States?
It already has. When President Trump said that he wants to take Panama Canal back. By the way, Panama Canal was under the U.S. occupation as Canal Zone until 1919, after which there was a kind of joint condominium, both United States and Panama. From 1999, it has gone back to Panama again. So there is a history there. So the Panamanian president isn't terribly happy. And when President Trump said, jokingly perhaps, Canada should become the 51st state of the United States, that didn't go down very well in Ottawa. So whether it is empty threat or not, let's look at the position of Greenland. First of all, it has got a very small population, 56,000 people. United States already has a strategic footprint there. It has got a surveillance base, it has an air force base, and Greenland, by the way, enjoys autonomous status, although it's part of Denmark. Denmark doesn't have an awful lot to say here. So what I would imagine is that if Trump administration sort of floats a massive economic package for these 56,000 people, who knows? They might say that, yes, now we are dependent on Denmark for our day-to-day living. So we might as well go with the United States, which is much closer. It's a superpower anyway. So I wouldn't say that it is an empty rhetoric. There may be some thinking behind it. And let's not forget, Trump had talked about in 2019 in his first presidency, which sort of led to a big furore in Denmark. And Trump canceled his trip to Denmark at that moment. So I would imagine that there is a lot of work going on, and some of his hawks are providing some inputs to the new administration.
No, certainly. I mean, he wants TikTok to stay. On day one, he plans to move out of the WHO as well, something that Joe Biden had to reverse in 2020. But, he's not even made his way to the Oval, and it seems like already these crucial ties, just like with Panama, with Canada, and with Denmark and Greenland, they seem to be straining. I mean, isn't this sort of like a shoot yourself in the foot kind of a situation, or am I reading it all wrong?
Well, I mean, there is a certain degree of bravado here. I mean, Trump is sort of buoyant, is riding on that web of massive popular mandate that he received in his presidential election. So he has got the internal crowd. His base, American base, is very strong, and he would like to use that to sort of push through some of these agendas. And whether he's going to be warmongering, because he simply cannot go and say that we want to take Panama Canal back from Panama. But by the way, there is a treaty that sort of binds both Panama and United States in terms of neutrality. How is he going to violate that specific treaty to which United States is a signatory? That's number one. Second, Greenland is a possibility because it has a very kind of strange and unique position. It's autonomous. It is a part of Denmark, but it is a part of Denmark because they are dependent on the money that comes from Denmark, just like you have Mayotte in Indian Ocean or other places in the Caribbean, Aruba, which is based on Netherlands. So if there is a massive financial package, I would imagine that is possible. The other option would be to let Greenland continue as an autonomous region, such as Puerto Rico, which is again another American colonies, quote unquote. So, and given that there are a lot of strategic imperatives here, we haven't talked about the Northwest Passage, the global warming, and the melting of the Arctic ice, and the opening of the new sea route.
We've got some of those serene looking beautiful visuals also, Professor. Sorry for interjecting. I mean, let's throw those visuals out also. I mean, this entire, sheet of ice, this expanse of glaciers, it's quite quickly dwindling with, global temperatures, right on the horizon. And of course, the scientific number of 1.5 degree threshold, well, we've clearly shattered that barrier. You know what, Professor? Like you mentioned about Texas, you mentioned about the Louisiana Accord as well. Let's tell the viewers a little bit about the past bids of United States. The US has a long history of land acquisitions. In the 1860s, just like the professor mentioned, President Andrew Johnson explored Greenland's potential. In 1946, you had President Harry Truman, who offered $100 million for the island. Historic purchases like the Louisiana Territory in 1803 and Alaska from Russia, mind you, in 1867, reshaped U.S. borders. And critics initially mocked, Professor, Alaska's acquisition as Seward's folly until finally gold was discovered decades later. So there seems to be some sort of weightage at play here as well. All right. So the nearby, neighbors might not have so much of a problem. There's a lot of grandstanding at play here, bravado, like you mentioned. But what about these territorial aspirations, hitting and impacting global perceptions towards the United States? People far away from the United States are still looking and consuming all of this news.
Well, it's not going to go down very well so far as international psyche is concerned. Here is a president who is talking about bringing peace, ending the war in Ukraine, or bringing peace back to Middle East and so on and so forth. And then he's talking about taking territories, sovereign territories from other countries. So that's not going to go down very well. But again, given the model that we have at the moment, international political and strategic scenario, anything is possible. The reason why in the past United States managed to buy those territories that we just talked about, Louisiana was a swamp. They didn't realize there is oil in there. Alaska, they didn't realize it was a frozen territory. So Russia didn't realize what was underneath. So, but those things are not possible any longer. Things are different. People know that there is something underneath always. But to go back, as I said, to the Greenland area, United States already has a strategic footprint. It's a massive strategic footprint, and Denmark is very far away to Greenland compared to United States. If you look at the eastern seaboards, it's like a stone's throw, so to speak. So it might so happen that it will persuade, although there was a kind of rebuttal from the former Greenland Prime Minister that the territory is not for sale to United States or whoever else. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a referendum tomorrow and United States sort of gives this package saying that your future is better off being with the United States,
Professor,
especially the shipping line and the challenges that we have in terms of security. Denmark cannot oversee the security threat that might
Professor,
come to Greenland.
Professor, if I could ask you, if I could put you on the spot here, how much do you think Greenland costs? Can we put a price tag on the large island?
Well, we don't know what's underneath because there have been a lot of surveys and they say that that has got precious rare earth. And it's the largest island. But I wouldn't worry too much about what is underneath, but I would worry too much about the strategic location. It is a kind of mid-Atlantic island with the thawing of Arctic ice, the global warming, and so on and so forth. Greenland's landscape is going to change dramatically. So it will attract a lot of new settlers. So we can't put a price, obviously, because we don't know.
I
It's not
was reading a
clearly.
report. I was reading a report. It said, considering all the industries at play, and if you calculate everything, it's rounding up to about 1.9 trillion dollars. But I think that's still too little. How does that number sound to you? 1.9 trillion dollars, the referendum that only for pure hypothetical purposes here, that referendum that you're talking about, a package that suddenly goes there. Of course, Danish restrictions and curbs on that particular part as well. But 1.9 trillion dollars, do you think that's a fair price for for an island as big as Greenland?
Well, I mean, we are talking about 56,000 odd people, and if you give them, if they're settled for life, and if they get US citizenship, which will come with that, obviously, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go for that, because at the moment, Greenland is in a very precarious position. They haven't severed their ties with Denmark because they are dependent on all the protection, the money that comes with it. So if there is another actor, if there is another player who can do that for them, so why not? I mean, they can sort of shop around and see if that is possible. And if United States promises that they can continue with their autonomy, but they won't no longer be with Denmark, so I wouldn't see why they wouldn't be going down that
It
particular path. And ethnically, the population in Greenland is not what we have in Denmark. They are not the Nordic people. They're mostly the Inuits and the people from that particular indigenous population.
right.
United States can sort of establish that link, saying that listen, in Alaska we have got native indigenous population, the First Nation, and will
Right.
continue being that.
No, you're absolutely right. And, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head when you talk about the strategic advantages that Greenland does actually offer. And I think Denmark was that stopgap that's possibly stopped this deal already. Otherwise, with the bravado and the grandstanding with which Donald Trump came through with it, I think that referendum would almost have been done. It would have been as good as one in the bag sort of a situation. But the strategic advantages, Professor, if we could throw some light on that. You spoke about more than what's underneath the ground, it's what can be built on the ground as well. So we know two of these rare earth minerals that are usually supplied to the global chain by Russia and China. Donald Trump does want to counter that, but there are specific bases. Take a look at this. It's situated in the North America, but by practice it's quite European. You've got Danish linkages over there as well. The sea trade offers a lot of opportunities as well. Could you throw some light on that, the advantages that Greenland does offer?
Well, in the first instance, although it has remained frozen, the kind of ice sheet is slowly retreating in Greenland at the moment. So we talk about the Northwest Passage, the way global warming is continuing. So in another by 2100, that's like another 75 years from now, Greenland would be like Azores in the Middle Atlantic, which happens to be a part of Portuguese territory. So that's something which is not unthinkable. That's number one. But the most challenging aspect of it is that it's going to open up a new sea route between Europe and Asia and the Americas here. So all the ships that are going at the moment by Indian Ocean, they can start moving from the top. For instance, Russia can sort of start trading with other parts of South America, perhaps, or China could do the same rather than going the roundabout way. That's number one. Second, it's strategically very, very critical to US security. Let's talk about Greenland being Cuba in the North Atlantic. If Chinese, for instance, Chinese have bought territories, we have seen it in terms of military presence in Hambantota in Sri Lanka, and we also have seen them in places such as Eritrea in Africa. So territories are for sale for military purposes, and we have seen now recently the transfer of Diego Garcia, the Chagos Archipelago back to Mauritius. So these things happen, and whoever has got big pockets has got an
Right.
advantage. So I wouldn't say that President Trump is just talking nonsense because he's, after all, kind of a president. He's going to take over fairly soon. He has got the experience. So when he's talking about it, he's coming from somewhere. His advisors have done the groundwork, I would imagine. Otherwise, he wouldn't be talking this senseless talk.
With somebody with as deep pockets like him, I mean, you're saying this is not nonsensical talk. You know the memes that are doing the round on social media. Donald Trump sitting on that basket, and on the Amazon list, it's Greenland, Iceland, and Canada, and he's tick marking each and every one of those, pushing him to his from his wish list, pushing it to the checkout box, and he's buying all of it out. But we'll have to wait and find out.